Hey everybody, and welcome to Epic Everyday, our weekday podcast for busy, stressed out Christians who want to do more than just survive. I'm Liz Frericks, and this is my husband, Evan.
Good morning.
We're so glad to have you guys with us on this wonderful Friday.
Yeah. Happy Friday. You're so sarcastic on Fridays.
I'm sorry, I just can't help it. I mean, I feel for all you guys that are just like, Friday, the end of the week, yes.
You do?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I remember being there.
Just let us have our thing.
I guess it's just, since I've changed my life around so much, I just love Mondays because it's like, yay, I get to do all the stuff God's called me to do, and it's so awesome. And
well, we can answer God's call every day of the week, even on the weekend.
True. Yeah. Anyway, since it's Friday, we are going to talk about being complete, which involves utilizing your entire self, being fully present, not being stuck in the past or the future on the worry-regret spectrum, and then engaging with what is actually happening. So you're not living in some kind of alternate universe where somebody says like, oh, you need a haircut, and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you just said that I'm ugly, and da 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 da. You actually are like, oh, they said I need a haircut.
Sure. Right.
And let's, get rid of all the baggage there and just deal with what's actually happening. So, and this week, since we are talking about faithfulness, we thought we would talk about some of the lies that we believe and how that affects our ability to be faithful.
Mm-hmm. I thought we'd start out by saying, where do we get some of these lies from? I mean, they come from Satan, of course, but I think they're just there's just the world system kinds of things embedded in our culture.
Oh, yeah.
And I think, I hope we're aware of them, but it's good to just kind of continually be like, oh yeah, if I was thinking about television, I guess. Television, movies, radio, the internet, just things that are...
Magazines.
Yeah, I guess it's any media, but there's messages there. It's not just the news or whatever. There's always some message there,
right.
and it's such a fast track right into our brain. I just want to be aware of it. Like if we're talking about faithfulness this week, and so if we're like, well, how do I learn about faithfulness? Oh, I learned everything about faithfulness I need to know from Seinfeld, or pick your television show where people are a more obvious, it's just an obvious display of look out for number one. I mean, there's friendships and stuff, but it's not going to teach you about faithfulness. It's not going to teach you godly principles. And we just want to be aware of that.
Right. And since faithfulness is kind of, the essence of faithfulness is seeing with eyes of faith and then acting on that. And so if we're not seeing with eyes of faith, if we're believing some kind of lie, then we're not going to act according to faith. It's impossible to act according to faith if you believe something that's not true.
Yeah. And part of our faithfulness is going to be over and over again in the Bible, God tells his people to resist or outright oppose these other religious systems.
Right.
The things that I don't ordain, don't do that.
Right.
And that's going to take some active resistance on our part.
Yeah, it's hard. The girls and I went to the Secret Keeper Girls conference a while back, and we were just talking about, the whole thing was about Ephesians 2:10, which says, for you are created in God's workmanship in Christ Jesus to do good works which God has prepared in advance. It's hard for me to remember what the exact, because they were using a different version than what I'm used to. But anyway, so they were talking about how that word, God's workmanship, has connotations of being a masterpiece. And then they really were like, do you see yourself as God's masterpiece? Because when we, especially for women, when we're looking at magazines in the grocery aisle and, television and all that kind of stuff, there is an element where it's like, okay, if I don't fit this certain perspective of beauty, then I'm not a masterpiece. It was really cool.
Right. That's a powerful one. There's lots of some of these other messages that I thought of that we're going to have to constantly be on guard about is just different things like pride is a virtue. Like, I think that's something in our culture, or that getting even is okay, and that you got to do it,
An eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth.
or that sex is a need. I think that's a huge one in our culture too. It's like
it's like food.
Right. I need it. Or that might is right. Like that's kind of the evolution, right? The strongest survive, survival of the fittest. But I think unconsciously translate that into our life. Like if you can do something, then you can get away with it.
Right.
Who cares about if you should do it or not?
I agree. I think there are a lot of those general cultural beliefs that we have. But I also think Satan tells us specific lies.
Oh, absolutely.
John Eldredge, in his book, The Sacred Romance, talks about the arrows, the lies that Satan kind of shoots us with over and over again. And I think partly we get those messages because we're predisposed to repeat those kinds of situations, just like we talked about yesterday. If we're used to being in abusive relationships, we never get in a non-abusive relationship.
That's just normal life.
Right, exactly. And there's no little, I don't even know how to explain it to somebody who's never been there. There's no knee-jerk reaction of maybe this isn't appropriate. Yeah, it's just this is the norm,
Never even crosses your mind.
Right. Whereas for somebody that isn't predisposed to that kind of thing, they're going to be like, whoa, what did you just say to me? Or what do you think you're doing? Like there's no tolerance for that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's dangerous too because it could also turn into judgments. Like, how are you struggling with this? That's so easy. Why is this a problem for you?
Right.
Pull yourself up by your bootstraps and get right, dude. I don't know. Unfortunately, as Christians, we can not sort of have that grace attitude towards other people's struggles.
Right. Well, and like I said yesterday, that's where EFT comes in because those things are so deeply ingrained in our subconscious that we don't do this is going through my mind consciously. I can decide whether this is right or wrong. It's below all that. Yeah. We don't even think about it. It doesn't even cross our minds. Mm-hmm. So I think partly the situations we've been in, but partly a big part of it, at least for me, was the lies that I tell myself. That somebody said to me at one point in time, and I just said it over and over and over again to myself every time something happened. Like, oh yeah, you are so clumsy.
Sure. Well, and a lot of that stuff's caught, not taught. It's not. Some of these messages are told, and some of them are just attitudes that we absorb, especially as children, like the clumsy one, or a value one, right? Like if I'm not treated with respect and dignity, then I start to think that I don't deserve that.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think we unknowingly perpetuate those lies in our lives by keeping those same tapes running through our heads, whether it is the things we tell ourselves or even just the things like there are times where if I do certain things, I will hear someone else's voice in my head being like, oh, look, here it is again, Yeah. And it's like I give them permission to tell me that all over again, even when they're not present physically.
Mm-hmm. That is really Satan's faithfulness there is to continually exploit our weaknesses. He's very faithful to do that.
Right. Well, and that's the thing that John Eldredge talks about with the arrows. Like, it's the same message just pounded in over and over and over and over. And it's very hard to resist that. I mean, it's one thing to resist when you're like, oh, I'm just getting bombarded with a lot of small messages. But when it is hitting the same spot in your armor over and over and over again, that's really difficult.
Yeah. And I think we've been dealing with this. I mean, I think one of those chinks in you and I's armor is issues with the car. Like, for some reason, that's come up so much in the last year. And it's been so devastating. Right. For some people, it might seem silly. It's like, oh, you just fix the car. But it's causing doubt. And it's like, God, why is this still a problem? Like, are you going to take care of us? Like, what's going on here? So there's a chink there. But then we've been actively trying to fix up the chink, to take that to God in prayer, to work on that part, and to trust His faithfulness, because that is there. That's true. We just need to get engaged with it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think it's interesting because, at least for the car thing, for me, it's a matter of severity. Like, when somebody hands me a bill for $1,000, I'm just like, it's like so much that just takes your breath away. Whereas for some people, that really just wouldn't be a problem. And that's one of the reasons why I struggle with the car because it's a bigger expense than some of our other expenses.
Oh, sure.
But when I think about, like, does God have $1,000? Oh, yeah. Like, that's nothing to him. So it should be just as easy for me to be like, yep, okay, Lord, you have thousands of dollars. I'm just going to trust you to give us the money for that.
Mm-hmm. I really like this part in James 5. I'll just read 3 verses here, 13 through 16. It's just, there's a lot of things in here about how we can be faithful to one another, how we can faithfully obey God's idea of the way things work. And these are things that will replace those messages that we get from the world system. It says, is anyone among you suffering? He should keep on praying. Is anyone cheerful? He should keep reciting psalms. Is anyone among you sick? He should call the elders of the church, and they should pray for him and anoint him with oil in the name of the Lord. And the prayer offered in faith will save the person who is sick. The Lord will raise him up. If he has committed any sins, he will be forgiven. Therefore, make it your habit to confess your sins to one another and to pray for one another so that you may be healed. The prayer of a righteous person is powerful and effective. And so I think we hear things like even reading it just now, it's like, yeah, I agree with this stuff, but we need to somehow get connected with how powerful these things are. They're so simple, and it sounds like, oh, you just pray. And, as Christians, we're very familiar with these ideas, but these are the powerful tools that God has given us to fight the world system and to engage with his faithfulness and to build a stronger Christian community and to increase our own faith. And we can't get tired of those things. We have to not get tired of that stuff. We have to realize how fresh and exciting and and interesting those things are, and how there are lifelines.
One of the things that I've really enjoyed doing the last few years is praying, like I said, praying for God to give me more faith, but also praying for God to show me the lies that I'm believing and what the truth is. Because we can't see what we don't know to look for. Mm-hmm. So, when God, he has been so faithful to put people in my life or Bible verses or different situations that, constantly are pushing that, okay, here's the problem here. Oh, well, that's because I believe this crazy thing. How do I change that? Okay, let me run to the Lord and ask him to do the work, and then do the work of doing EFT and things like that to actually change those thought processes.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So Satan is constantly throwing up in our face our weaknesses, those arrows, the things that he knows will make us trip and fall. But then Jesus is bringing up before us the same things, but in love. And he's saying, let me sort this out for you.
Yeah.
Let's get this solved. Let's fix this chink in your armor. So he's using our weaknesses and our brokenness, and he's bringing them into the light. Whereas Satan, in his bizarre way, is keeping it in the light sort of, but it's also keeping it hidden because we're stuck there. Whereas when God brings it to the light, we can actually do something about it.
Yeah.
And he is faithful to do that.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and his part of his faithfulness is the opposite of the world system. There's no shame involved. When these things are brought to light, it's just forgiveness and taking care of the problem. It's a sin thing. It's the way we think about the world, but there's no shame there, which I just cherish so much.
It is definitely mind-boggling.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully that gives us all some stuff to work on. I know that, working on what are the lies that I believe has always been a very fruitful area for me.
Yeah, that'll make your prayer life vibrant and your life more interesting, that's for sure.
We love you guys, and we're praying for you. As always, pick whether today is going to be awesome or not. You can pick whether your weekend is going to be awesome too. Mm-hmm. Whether you're going to create those neural pathways to look for good things. And come back next week, and we are going to talk about forgiveness and possibly reconciliation.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah, they're not synonyms.
Exactly. We love you guys. Have an awesome weekend.
Yep. See you later.